Welcome to Whispers After Midnight. Tonight, I bring you not just one, but two chilling tales. Stories that will crawl under your skin and stay with you long after the last word is spoken. For the best experience, put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let the shadows around you grow deeper. First, we board the midnight train, a journey that doesn't end where you think it does. And then, we'll step into another nightmare that waits just beyond the veil of darkness. So, are you ready? Then let the whispers begin. It was past midnight when Darren boarded the last train. The platform was nearly empty, the fluorescent lights above flickering like dying stars. A bitter wind chased through the station, carrying with it the scent of rust, oil, and something faintly sour like old blood. He pulled his coat tighter and stepped into the carriage, not realizing until the doors hissed shut behind him that he was the only passenger inside. The train jolted as it pulled away from the platform. Darren chose a seat near the middle of the carriage, his reflection staring back at him from the darkened windows. He told himself it was just another late ride after work, but something about the silence gnawed at him. The hum of the engine was deeper than usual, like a growl beneath the floor. He glanced down the carriage empty. At least, that's what he thought. The train slowed for the first stop. No one boarded, but when Darren looked back down the aisle, a man was sitting 3 rows away. He hadn't heard the doors open, hadn't seen him enter. The man wore a black coat and hat, head bowed, face hidden. Darren shifted uneasily. As the train lurched forward again, he swore the man moved closer, though Darren hadn't seen him stand. More stops followed. With each one, another passenger appeared, an old woman clutching a cracked doll, a young boy with hollow eyes, a businessman whose skin seemed far too pale. None of them ever boarded. They were simply there, as though the train conjured them out of the darkness. At the 3rd stop, the intercom crackled. Darren expected the conductor's calm voice announcing the station, but what came through was distorted, whispering, like static forming words. No escape, all aboard, destination below. Darren froze, staring up at the speaker. When he glanced back at the passengers, they were all staring at him, blank eyes fixed, unblinking. The windows outside no longer showed the city. Instead, Darren saw stretches of forest, then endless fields, then tunnels lit by a sickly green glow. The deeper the train traveled, the less real the outside looked, as though it were painted on glass. The passengers grew stranger too. The boy's head lolled at an unnatural angle, as if his neck had snapped. The old woman whispered lullabies in a language Darren didn't know. The businessman smiled too wide, teeth sharp and glistening. For a moment, Darren thought he was alone again. Then the door to the carriage opened, and a man in a conductor's uniform stepped inside. His uniform was tattered, cap tilted low, but his voice was urgent. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "When it stops next, don't get off, no matter what you hear." His eyes darted to the other passengers, then back to Darren. "Stay in your seat. Pretend pretend you don't exist. Before Darren could respond, the conductor moved on, vanishing through the next door. The passengers hadn't shifted an inch, but Darren felt their attention return to him, heavier than ever. At the penultimate stop, the doors slid open with a hiss. Darren heard footsteps, though the platform outside was empty. Then, slowly, a figure appeared, tall, shrouded in shadows that clung like smoke. It sat directly across from Darren. Though its face was hidden, Darren felt its smile. A low voice, not from its mouth, but from inside Darren's head, whispered, "We've been waiting for you." The intercom roared to life again, louder this time, a chorus of voices overlapping. "No, return, no, return, no, return." Darren clutched the seat, heart pounding. The scenery outside was gone now, only blackness remained. He realized with dawning horror that the train wasn't traveling through the city at all. It was descending, each stop lower than the last, into somewhere far beneath the earth. The train screeched into its final destination. Through the window stretched a black expanse filled with writhing shapes, thousands of eyes reflecting dim light. The doors opened with a hiss, and the smell of rot and burning filled the carriage. The shadowed figure across from Darren rose. The other passengers stood too, faces peeling away to reveal what they truly were, things of bone, ash, and hunger. The conductor's voice echoed one last time, faint and desperate, "Don't leave the train." But Darren couldn't move. The shadow leaned close, whispering, "This is your stop." Something vast, ancient, and hungry waited just beyond the threshold. And as Darren was pulled screaming into the darkness, the midnight train shuddered, ready to depart again for the next soul foolish enough to board. The midnight train has reached its final stop, but the night is far from over. If you thought that ride was unsettling, the next story will take you even deeper into the shadows. Lean back, keep those headphones on, and let's step into the next nightmare. The Man at the Window. It began on a Wednesday night when the city was unusually quiet. The kind of silence that feels like it doesn't belong, as though the air itself is holding its breath. Mariah sat in her apartment, the 15th floor of the Ridgeway complex, a glass of red wine in her hand and her laptop glowing in front of her. She had been scrolling through emails she didn't want to answer, fighting the urge to sleep. At 2:57 a.m., she yawned, closed her laptop, and moved toward the balcony. She liked to stand there before bed, watching the scattered streetlights below. But when she reached the glass sliding door, she froze. Someone was standing at her window. A man, tall, unnervingly thin. He didn't move. His face was pale, almost blurred by the shadows of the night, but his eyes were unmistakable dark and locked directly on hers. Mariah's heart thudded violently in her chest. It was impossible. Her apartment was 15 stories high. There was no balcony outside that window. No ledge. Nothing but sheer glass and the open city below. She blinked hard, stepped back, and when she looked again, he was gone. Mariah laughed nervously to herself, convincing her mind it was exhaustion. Too much wine, too little sleep. Shadows could play tricks on tired eyes. That had to be it. But deep down, a part of her knew this wasn't just shadows. The next night, she stayed up again. She told herself it was just in her head, but by 3 a.m., she couldn't stop herself from glancing toward the window. Her chest tightened, her breath caught, and there he was. The same man, standing outside the glass, 15 floors above the ground. His lips curled, almost like he was trying to smile, but failing. A grotesque twitch that stretched too wide. Mariah screamed, grabbing her phone, fumbling to take a picture. But the moment she hit the shutter, the man disappeared. When she checked her gallery, the photo showed only the night sky and the empty streetlights. She didn't sleep that night. By the third night, she knew it was more than exhaustion. Because this time she heard it. A faint tapping. Tap, tap, tap against the glass. She didn't want to look, but her eyes were dragged toward the sound, and there he was. The man. His pale face inches away from the glass, fogging it with every slow breath. Mariah stumbled backward, clutching a kitchen knife, though she knew it was useless. She screamed at him, "Go away." Her voice cracked. But he only tilted his head like he was studying her. And then, without moving his lips, she heard the whisper, "Let me in." Her blood turned to ice. Mariah couldn't keep this to herself anymore. The following day, she confided in her neighbor, Mrs. Elkins, an elderly woman who had lived in Ridgeway Complex since it was built. At first, Mrs. Elkins laughed it off, but when Mariah mentioned the man's description, tall, thin, pale, her face drained of color. "You shouldn't have looked at him," Mrs. Elkins whispered. "He's been here since before this building was finished. People used to talk about him, the window man. They said he waits outside, high above the ground, and chooses someone to watch. Once he does, he doesn't stop." Mariah shook her head in disbelief. "That's just a story." Mrs. Elkins only gave her a look of pity. "Then, why does he only appear at 3 o'clock in the morning to people on the upper floors? And why do those people eventually?" She stopped. "Eventually what?" Mariah demanded. Mrs. Elkins didn't answer. She only closed her door and muttered through the wood, "Don't answer him, no matter what he says." That night, Mariah tried everything, closing the blinds, turning off every light, even blasting music through her headphones. But at 3 a.m., she felt it again. That same weight in the air. That instinct telling her she was not alone. She ripped off her headphones and turned toward the window. The blinds were shaking, though no wind should have reached them. Slowly, trembling, she pulled them aside. The man was there, closer than ever. His hand pressed against the glass. The tapping came faster now, tap, 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 tap. "Let me in," the whisper came again. Louder, clearer. Mariah screamed, but the sound was swallowed by silence. The man's other hand rose, pressing a long finger to his lips. SHHH, he whispered. Just open it, only once, and you'll never be alone again. Tears blurred Mariah's vision. She ran to her bedroom, locked the door, and huddled under her blankets like a terrified child. She could still hear it, the tapping, steady and patient, until the first light of dawn. When she woke, the glass door bore faint smears, as though someone's face had been pressed against it for hours. Mariah tried to move out, but her landlord laughed at her request to break the lease. "What's the problem, ghosts?" he joked. She left his office trembling. That night, she packed a bag. She didn't care about the lease anymore. She would leave. But before she could go, she made the mistake of glancing at the window one last time. The man was inside, standing in her living room. Mariah's scream never left her throat. Her phone fell from her hand as the figure stepped forward, taller now, his limbs stretching unnaturally. His grin finally completed itself, tearing too wide across his face. He whispered one final time, "Thank you for letting me in." The neighbors reported hearing only silence after 3 a.m. When police entered her apartment the next morning, the window was locked from the inside. Mariah was gone. All that remained were smudges on the glass, 2 handprints, and the faint outline of a face pressed against it from within. You have made it through the night. But darkness never truly ends. Subscribe and come again when the clock strikes midnight. Until then, stay safe